going to sew the summer shorts Oscar. They have got quite a few lovely techniques for you to learn, like these lovely slanted pockets, little keyring tabs, tabs on the ties. You've got a brilliant elasticated waistband, which looks really cool. And if you find this a little bit too difficult, there are also other options on the project page. So if you now click on the exclamation mark in the top right hand corner of this video, the project page link will come up, and also underneath it the link to the pattern, so you can access that really easy. As fabric, I've used some linen. I think linen is great for the summer, but you can use any cotton fabric. You need 5 centimeter wide elastic, some matching yarn, and I've also got some eyelets here. If you have never put in any eyelets before, I would try it on a separate piece of fabric first. And then I've also got these lovely ties there, which make the waistband adjustable in size around the waist, which is brilliant, and a little scrap for the tabs. So let's get started. For the pocket, we need the pocket template. The fabric is facing with the right side down and the wrong side up. Place your pocket template over the top, and then you simply iron all the edges in. And of course what that does is that both pockets will be exactly the same. So templates are a really good way to get things absolutely correct. So take your template out, give it a good press from the right side as well. And then finally we're going to turn in that little bit up here. But of course you don't need to do that. You could just overlock that. And that would also be good because you don't see it at the end of the day. What you don't see is not so important, is it? So, but for now, we're just going to iron everything so you can put that pocket away safe. We're going to do the keyring tab, and you fold in the fabric from either side, give that a good press, and then we're going to top stitch that from either side later. Always get in the habit of doing all the ironing first or the prep first and then carry on. The pockets for the front are just folded over, so the right side is on the inside, and then we iron that crease in. Important is that you have a pair. Now when we're going to sew the pocket, I'm doing that from the inside, and I'm making sure that my seam allowance lines up with a 2 centimeter. I'm also adding another line, and there you just have to get familiar with your own presser foot. Mine is a pfaff, so I line the stitch line I've already got up with the part of the machine foot where the clear plastic goes into the metal. That's for me what I line it up with, but you have to find your own one on your presser foot. And again, make sure that the stitch length is 3 to 3.5. It looks better when the stitch length is longer. Next, we're going to do our dart. You've snipped the dart. You've seen that in the preparation video. So if you haven't watched that, then I would watch that first. The dart is 8 centimeters long, and it's not actually necessary to put a pin in, because if you line up the upper edge on top of each other and you go straight down, you actually do a dart on your sewing machine. So make sure you secure it at the end, and then we're going to fold the fabric over the dart so that the dart faces the longer side of the top trouser, and we're going to top stitch this again with stitch length 3 or even 3.5, and this time I put the seam onto one of the red markings of my presser foot. Now we can do the pocket placing. How do I get the pocket exactly in the right place? That is usually not quite so easy. You have to do like all these chalk markings, etc. We're not going to do that. We're just simply going to remove our positioning template here. And with that gone, of course, we've got the perfect position. All you need to do now is to put this pattern piece back onto your trouser, put the pocket on, pin it into place, and you have got the perfect position. And then on the other leg, of course, you do it exactly the opposite way around, and you've got them both in the same position. fab, isn't it? Sometimes it's real easy little tricks. Don't need to tack anything or do any complicated stuff here. And now we're going to top stitch it, and again I'm using the red marking, this time the right hand side one on my puff machine, to get a really even top stitch so that it's at the same distance to the edge of the fabric all the time. When you come to doing single stitching, these electronic machines aren't really that good because you can't reverse just a tiny little bit to get it exactly right. So for precision sewing, like when you're making pockets and stuff, the electronic puff machine actually isn't as good as the mechanical one. I would always go, if you are going out to buy a sewing machine, get a mechanical one first. Although I really love this electronic one because it's got a lot of embroidery stitches, and the force with which this goes through the fabric is just phenomenal. It transports anything. So it's a brilliant, brilliant machine, but only as a second machine, not as my first machine. Now that I've got my pocket on, I've ironed that, and I now put them right sides facing each other, and we're going all the way around here with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And again, you might notice that I don't use pins, and I do think that it's a good habit to get into. You line up the edges of the fabric, and then you move the fabric so it always enters the presser foot straight. That's the thing. You can't sort of kind of shimmy it around at the last minute. You need to have the fabric moved over. Now disable your knife for the overlocking process, because it's really easy when you have a curve to cut into your fabric. And believe you me, in the sewing courses this has happened so many times. So disable the knife for all this stuff. Now we're going to work the front side pocket. And to get it looking as nice as this, you've already done the pocket in the sense that you've ironed it over. So the right side is on the inside. So flip that over. So the right side is facing the right side, and we're going to stitch this across. 1 centimeter seam allowance, relatively small stitch this time, and you really push your fabric in. You never ever want to stretch this. You could also add some China tape to this. I haven't done that because it's not really necessary. This is not going to go anywhere. But if you are stretching it while you're sewing, then you have a problem. You could iron the seam apart here, but I'm going to understitch it. I think that's nicer and it adds more stability. And also, again, I move the fabric into the machine, so I'm just holding it in as I go so that I don't have to use the China tape to give this pocket the stability it needs. Also, I get a really nice edge here. So if I fold this back, I don't even need to iron this. Of course you can, but it's not necessary. I get a beautiful edge, and I'm going to top stitch that again, foot width, to make it look really cool. Again, you could use 2 lines. If you're making a girly one, you could use like a row of hearts. That's up to you. And we can close the pocket at the lower end. 1 centimeter seam allowance all the way across. And now we're going to overlock this as well. Now we're going to work the center front, and we're going to top stitch all the way around here, but not down the leg, mind. So 1 centimeter seam allowance, and if you are unsure that you're going to get the curve just right, I would mark this with tailor's chalk actually, or pencil, it's fine. However you do it, I find that beginners usually get this wrong. They stop too short in front of the center here. You can see here how far in I had to actually sew to get my centimeter seam allowance. So it's a good idea to draw this with a pencil if you are starting out on your sewing machine. Make sure the fabric's on top of each other, and we are now going to overlock this, and this is where it's so easy to cut into your fabric. So disabling the knife is ever so important. So we're going around here. You can lift the presser foot as well to make sure that you don't come off the edge, and you can move the fabric back under. And the bit where it cuts in is here. Enable your knife again, and where you have got the center front snip, we're going to iron this, and then we're going to do the top stitching again. So let's iron this. Now you also need to know which way to top stitch this. So if it's in front of you, the seam allowance faces the right way, and on the back the seam allowance needs to face to the left, so that when we sew them together, the seam allowances both face the same way, because we're going to top stitch them. It wouldn't look very good if the top stitching was on one side on the front and then on the other side on the back. And so we're top stitching this seam allowance down now, and I'm doing that by lining up my little red line on my presser foot with the seam line. And if you haven't got a puff sewing machine, you of course have to find your own little place on your presser foot. And if you can get yourself a presser foot with these markings, it really is a brilliant thing. Now I'm going to stitch again all the way down, presser foot width this time. Again, make sure that the stitch length is always enlarged to 3 or 3.5 when you're top stitching. If you look at your jeans, you'll see how long the stitches are, and move the fabric round so that you don't get any creases in here. Now we're going to do the front. This time I'm using the little red markings on the left side of my presser foot, and I line that up with the edge of the fabric, and I go all the way down. Here the curve is much more difficult to sew, so you want to make sure that you really move the fabric round. I need to really hold on to that. You can see it here. Keep moving it round, lift the presser foot, because you get pleats into this really easily. And then to do my fake zipper, I do this from the inside of the trouser. So if you've cut everything out straight and you haven't cut off anything with your overlocker, so if you line up now the presser foot with the edge of the fabric, you should get a perfect line and you don't need to measure it. So the first stitching line I do from the inside, and I do a really nice curve here. Of course, I don't go slanted down as I have done on my first seam where I joined both pieces, but I go then straight across so it looks like a jeans zip fastening like this. And now that I've got this in really nicely, I can do another line from the outside. Now if you are a beginner and you find it very difficult to do like the lines really straight, then maybe it's not such a good idea to have a second line next to it, because then any mistakes would be more obvious. But if you want to give this a go and you're quite confident on your sewing machine, I would definitely do another line, because it then looks more like your jeans. Now we're going to do another row of top stitching foot width right up to our fake zipper. And that's much harder. You really have to move this along the fabric and pull it, because otherwise you will get some pleats in there. And sometimes on your jeans you can see it that they really slip with that stitching right over to the other stitching line, because it's not that easy to do, so take your time with it. Now I'm going to put a zigzag stitch in here, like a little tack, so that on a normal zip this would hold the zip in place and make do that as well. That would be really nice as well. I'm just going to put the tack there. I didn't find that the tacking looked that nice on the linen because of the weave. It didn't look as tidy, so I didn't do a second tack there. Now you want to secure the pocket so that it doesn't flap about and you catch it when you do other stitching. Put the front and the back on top of each other, and then we're going to line up the seam, and the front is a lot smaller than the back. It's meant to be like that. And you pop these on either side, and we're going to sew this with a centimeter seam allowance. And again, I have not pinned this, but you need to make sure that your pocket doesn't sort of move about. So in the pocket area, maybe a pin would not be a bad idea, especially if you've never done it before. But those of you that sew a lot, you probably don't need to pin this. And you can see here that mine ended up a bit longer at the bottom. That really does not matter. It's usually because you haven't cut out right, or you haven't just stuck to the seam allowances on the pocket just perfectly, and then you have a little bit of a difference there. We just cut that off later. Then we want to overlock all the nasty edges off, and it looks just brilliant. Now the overlocking's got a really pretty side and a not so pretty side. So pretty side up. So because we're going to do the seam towards the back, we had to have the overlocking on the top. So now I'm going to top stitch again all the way down, and I'm doing 2 lines again as well, but really force the fabric apart, because otherwise it's just going to kind of fold over and it's not going to look very nice. So when you get to the end where the hem is, you just do a few stitches across, and then you come back up and you stitch it foot width. And of course you have to do that on the other side as well. Don't forget, stitch length has to be 3 to 3.5. I'm going to put another tack in here so the pocket can't rip out, and I'm going to put that straight across there. So again, I'm choosing my zigzag stitch. And once you find the right zigzag stitch, it might not be such a bad idea to write this down. I have to check it out every single time because I forget to write it down. It's not quite in focus here, but anyway, trust me, it's a nice tack on there. So now I've done my sides. Now I can close the inner leg seam. I also put a pin here just so that can't move anywhere, and I go all the way around to the other side. Now make sure that you remove your pins, because of course if you overlock this and you hit the pin, the knife is broken, and the knives are so expensive for these machines. So make sure all the pins are out. Another good reason not to pin everything all the time. Now I'm going to press my legs. So fold them so the seams are on top of each other, and we're just going to give this a press like you would a man's trouser. And now we're going to turn the hem up, and you can do that 3 centimeters or 2.5. Doesn't really matter too much, whatever you like. Some people don't even pin any of this, they just turn it in and go. And also if you are really experienced sewer, you really don't need to pin this. But if you are pinning this, put it up 3 centimeters, turn it in 1 centimeter. Turn the trousers so you can sew on the inside. You can see me here moving the fabric over. It's so much easier. If you're trying to do it the other way around, it's not as easy. You could of course take the arm of the sewing machine off and then just push it over, but you would have to sew from the outside, which is also okay if you've pinned it right. So there are more ways to roam here than one, whatever you feel comfortable with. And while I'm there, I'm also quickly going to stitch my tabs. So I go down one side, I come back up the other side, and then I sew the tab onto the pair of trousers just above the pocket, and I would do it above the right hand side pocket. I think that looks better. Pin on either side so it can't move. Now you can roll them up. Mine doesn't look so brilliant because I used white overlocking thread, but I wanted you to be able to see it really clearly, so you can roll them up. Now we're going to do the waistband, and with the right side on the inside, we're going to close the center back seam 1 centimeter, iron the seam apart, and then fold it lengthways over again, iron that again, and very important, leaving a gap so the elastic will fit through. Sew all the way around close to the edge, about 3 millimeters off the edge, and then with that line in place, turn it over, right sides facing, and pin the waistband all the way around. We're trying here something new, which I thought makes it easier to do this industrial technique. Some people would finish the waistband first totally and then attach it. I think for you, this might be easier. So now I'm going to stitch this in close to the edge, yeah, not a centimeter, so the elastic has enough room to move still. So I've taken the arm of the machine off, and where I've left the gap, about 4 centimeters is plenty. I'm going to sew close to the edge, make sure nothing slips out. And go all the way around. Now I can take my elastic and I put my safety pin in, and I put it at the lower end of my elastic. So when I come out the other side, the lower end will remain on the lower part, so that I know which one goes together with the other side, because to be honest, elastic likes to twist, and sometimes I pull it through and I think, oh, I can't remember. But now, because I've remembered, it's at the lower bit, of course, the lower bits go together like that, and then I know I've done it right. So take a mental note. And now I'm just going to sew them together. They are overlapping by 1 centimeter. That's 3/8 of an inch, I think. And come down the other side, and then we can let the elastic slip back in and like stretch it so it really fits all the way around evenly. And now we're doing the actual sewing in. So we fold the waistband down, and now we're going to do our centimeter seam allowance. So what we've done now is just to make it easier to get it in. And an afterthought was you could have left the gap on the inside part of the waistband, of course, the center back seam, so that actually it would all be attached. That was an afterthought I just had right now. So maybe on the girl trouser I shall try that. I don't know. So you can see it, or I'll do a separate video just showing the waistband again. So now, where I have the opening, I have to be careful, of course, that I don't have the trouser pushing up too far in the gap. That's why I had to move it again. And now it's in. Before I top stitch this down on the edge, I'm going to overlock it. So again, I have to stretch it, and I overlock it from the inside so that the good side of the overlocking, obviously ears facing down and is visible. So now I'm going to top stitch this down as well, so the elastic really stays in place. And the best thing to do it is not to do it like this, where you stretch it from the front and the back, because it then likes to like push to the top, the lower part of the trouser. The best way to do it is how you see it in a minute. That's it. You use your 2 fingers either side of your presser foot to force the fabric there apart, and then you just pull it a little bit from the back, and that's fine. This is a lot easier than I thought it would be. If you do it like that, it's fairly simple. Make sure the tab's facing down as you sew over it. Now I'm going to put on my zipper foot so I can get right close to my eyelets, and I move the machine needle over all the way to the left. And I'm kind of hoping that you can do that on your sewing machine as well. And I just check where I need to line it up with. And on my machine, that's the machine teeth on the right hand side of my pfaff, so I'm just using that as my guide. Your guide might be slightly different on your machine because your zipper foot will be in a slightly different position. Just make sure you're fairly close there. There. Yo, gone past my eyelet. And that's my first line done. And then on the other side, I just move my presser foot over. Now, anyone working with a pfaff machine, this is really easy. If you've got a different machine, it probably won't be able to do that. To just move the needle over to the right hand side all the way. I haven't found a machine that does that. So if you do, I would really like to know if Husqvarna or if there's a Janome that does that. When I used to work in the courses with the Janomes, they didn't do that, and it was a bit annoying that you didn't have that function. So now I'm going to just glide along here. The presser foot is just touching on the left hand side, the seam between the waistband and the trouser, and the right hand side is fairly close to the eyelet. The eyelet isn't quite in the right position. I needed to come down a little bit lower. I probably didn't snip it quite right, but it still looks really cool. So I wouldn't, think you've done something wrong if it's just slightly out, because by the time the ties are in, you won't really see it. It'll look great anyway. And so the tie ends is something I've come up with a few hours of work. So you take your little tab thing, which is cut on the bias, so it has a bit of stretch, and then you fold that around your cord. So you need to have about 1 centimeter to 1.5 centimeters standing on the other side, if not 2. And then we're going to sew across, and we're going backwards and forwards a few times. That's actually really important so that it can't fray out or rip out. And then I'm going down, but I'm going at a slant towards the outside. So I have more space here as I go down. I'm sorry, my fingers are a little bit in the way of seeing that, but you can see how far over I'm going. That's quite a bit, and then I can trim that off and push this part over to the other side, and that of course is then like a little bell or something, isn't it? It's not as quick as that. It'll take you a couple of minutes. And then you can trim it so they're both the same and fray them out there. I've done that with a pin, and they look really, really cute. It kind of gives the trouser like that special touch. I always like that, just a little bit of a contrast. And now I thread this through the tunnel that I've left, and out it comes on the other side. Now you need to pull and push them until they're both the same length. And again, that takes a little bit longer than the 2 seconds I'm taking here. And then at the back, so that they don't get pulled out, you want to just stitch straight down the seam in the center there. You could even do a cross if you liked. And your trouser is finished. I hope you enjoyed watching this little video. There are more ideas on the project page, different waistbands, little things that you can do with this trouser, like adding those little extra pockets in the side pockets. So pop across. Also, if you now click on the exclamation mark, it'll take you straight to the project page or to the order page on Etsy.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.